now. And tonight we're going to continue with emotional intelligence and touching up slightly on mental health. It's a hot topic of discussion. Mental emotional health, it's a very important subject, and nobody should ignore their mental emotional health. And stigma related to mental health, it's already an old concept. It's not fashionable anymore, if you are to ask me, because if you look at world around, a lot of people are doing unthinkable things because they have no emotional intelligence. So the more we train and elevate our emotional intelligence, the better grasp we're going to have on our emotional health, mental health, and the health of those around us, right? Because one of the first things that emotional intelligence emotional intelligence comes with trainability. Unlike some geniuses like Mozart or Einstein, they were born with their genius, so to speak. It was in their gene, in their genetic makeup. Emotional intelligence is highly trainable. Yeah, and it begins with self-awareness. And self-awareness is not limited to, oh, I'm aware I have to put clothes on because I'm going to go outside and I shouldn't go outside naked. All right. That's not what self-awareness is limited to. Self-awareness has a lot of gradients, and it goes from zero self-awareness to when we are asleep to 100% self-awareness, to the point where we become aware that we are aware, and we are able to manage our stream of thoughts. So when we are able to manage our stream of thoughts, we are also able to manage our emotions, the intensity of the emotions that we feel, and that is highly trainable, right? That's not to say that you're not going to be triggered and you're not going to be upset by outside events, because certainly today a lot of people, and probably the entire country, it's mourning the loss of all those innocent lives. Just because an 18-year-old was emotionally unstable, that he probably had nobody to talk to about how he feels, why he feels the way he feels, and what to do with those feelings. So he won't turn into a psychopath, pull out the gun and go kill a bunch of children. There's not something, it's unfathomable. So self-awareness is a basic understanding of how we feel, how you feel, and also basic understanding that you are going to feel a gradient of emotions throughout the day. It's not going to be flat. It's going to be like the stock market, right? You're going to have good feelings in between, not so good feelings, and that is normal. Yeah. What is not normal, and nobody should do this, is to take their anger and throw it on someone else, like pick up the gun and go kill a bunch of kids, right? Well, a lot of us don't own guns. Some do, some don't. We're not going to cover that because that's politics related. I don't like politics. But we also have the ability to manage our anger before we throw it on somebody else, believing that the external world is that which triggers our internal emotion. It's an incomplete belief. It's not just the external that triggers your emotions. It is the internal as well. And I'm going to talk about that later. Internally, inside the human body, there are millions and billions of processes happening. There are systems within system, intercalated, cooperating, collaborating every single fraction of a second, right? So that's a lot at work inside a human body. So it's not just the outside that affects you. Of course, the outside is going to affect you because you're part of it and you're supposed to be affected. But we have what it takes to manage the gradients to which you are affected. So instead of being affected, let's say 70%, you can learn how to be affected, let's say 40%. And that is a big deal. That is a big deal because when you're affected at 40%, so to speak, then you have a few fractions of a second to pause and respond as opposed to react. Yeah. So responding versus reacting, it's definitely an aspect of the emotional intelligence that can be trained. Now, of course, that emotional intelligence, it's a new concept that was introduced in about 1990. But everything happens to such a speed that people that are not aware of the capacity to manage their emotions, it's sad and is detrimental, not only to them, but to those around you. So the more we can bring to your awareness that managing our emotions is doable, is trainable with simple little exercises, not just listening to me and Randy talk, not just listening to about your podcast, not just reading about emotional intelligence. That's not what it is. It takes practice. So currently, emotional intelligence is not taught in school as a curriculum, but there are schools of that train emotional intelligence. I train a lot of people to raise their emotional intelligence, especially when it comes to identity, to self, to the authentic self. Because by having self-awareness, by having emotional self-awareness, you become more in touch with who you are. And when you are more in touch with who you are and more content, if not happy, at least content with who you are, then you're not going to pick up the gun and go kill a bunch of kids. Yeah. And at least you're not going to have a need to dump your anger on somebody else. Right. Because how many times have I said this? Anger, it's a built-in mechanism meant to save your life, to protect you in case of danger. You're supposed to feel anger, but you're not supposed to throw your anger on somebody else unless they attack you and you fend for your life, you defend for your life, right? But with how many arguments and contradictions and a lot of these arguments and unpleasant, I don't want to call them, I don't want to use certain words, that it happens at home, with a family, with a loved one, at work, with the bosses, with the colleagues. We're stuck in traffic. We get angry at other drivers. But if we keep in mind that as we have emotions and as we have not so good emotions, maybe somebody else has their emotions even worse than us. As we go through difficulties, somebody is going through difficulties too. And if we learned anything through the pandemic, if we learn anything at all, is that everybody is affected. Everybody has some sort of pain, some sort of difficulties that they go through. So kindness is a requirement. It's free. It doesn't cost anything. Compassion, it's a requirement. It's free. It doesn't cost anything. So the second thing, if we learn anything through the pandemic, is compassion. And we learn that through a physical response. I mean, a lot of debate over vaccine or to vaccinate or not vaccinate. Well, you take in consideration that you might infect somebody else. So there's compassion. So we are not unique players on this planet, on this earth. We are affecting others through who we are, through how we feel, to how we think, not to mention to how we behave. So if we begin to manage that, if we begin to understand, and if we begin to manage that, sky's the limit, and it's sky's the limit for your success, for your happiness, for your well-being. Yeah. And then what I'm seeing more and more, especially with my clients, is that if someone has been, let's say, diagnosed with anxiety or depression, maybe it's clinical, maybe it's subclinical. It really doesn't matter. I see people identifying with the diagnosis. So my work is to take them out, to separate the diagnosis from their identity, because having a diagnosis, it doesn't make you be that. You are a unique individual with your own identity. You are not a label. You are not a diagnosis. You're probably dealing with depression. You're probably dealing with anxiety. Is anybody not dealing with anxiety nowadays, especially since the pandemic? I doubt that. Momentarily having moments when they do not deal with anxiety, yeah, definitely. And I remember there used to be a time when stress was a diagnosis. Stress a diagnosis. Can you believe that? Anybody that does not have stress, moments throughout the day, probably, but overall in life, I doubt, right? So when you begin to identify with a label, this is when you begin to have more stress. This is when you begin to have more anxiety and more depression and more all not good, right? So becoming self-aware, knowing yourself, knowing who you are, find a support group, elevate your emotional intelligence the best you can, show up to free training, show up to paid training. There are just so many different ways to elevate your emotional intelligence. And it begins with self-awareness. And self-awareness goes from just opening your eyes in the morning and being aware that you are waking up physically, all the way to becoming aware of being aware and have the capacity to manage your stream of thoughts, to manage the gradient of emotions that you feel, all the way to the capacity to feel something by choice at will. Generate an emotion, generate a state of your choice. Training is available for that. So Randy is going to talk a little bit about mental health and the lack of need. There is no need to have stigma attached to it. And before Randy goes in, if a doctor prescribes to you medicine, nowadays, with all of the technology, there's so many little squares doctors need to fill in and so many drop-down menus. If the doctor prescribes an SSRI to a chronic pain patient, it's not that that patient is depressed and has a stigma about depression. It's that this medicine works on more aspects of the physical body, and it helps with chronic pain. And if it helps with chronic pains and it takes the edge off, that person is able to function better. Doesn't mean that that person is depressed and needs to become even more depressed because there is a stigma over the depression. No, there is a difference between depression and clinical depression, right? So Randy?
Yeah, I think the one thing that, in terms of the stigma, that is important that just everyone is aware of is that if you go to a therapist, a social worker, psychologist, psychiatrist, nurse practitioner, physician's assistant, or primary care doctor, and they give they make a diagnosis like that, it's important that it's important to be aware that records of a person's what's called mental health, their mental health records, whatever medical parts of that, are the most protected medical records there are. They're more protected than just a regular medical record. And what I mean by protected is that it takes a judge and a court order to find out very detailed information about about a person's mental status and what you tell therapists. If somebody comes to see me as a licensed therapist, I can give out, if the insurance company wants to know something about why they're coming in, I can give them a diagnosis. I can let them know how many times they've come in, how much they were billed for, and all that. But anything else is 100% private, and it requires a court order. A judge has to, somebody has to show a judge that it's in the best interest of everyone that private information be released. It's some of the most secured information there is, and so the fear that somebody would find out anything is a little bit irrational, because it just can't. I mean, it does everything. People break the law all the time, but it's rare. And most mental health, if not everybody, in the mental health field are very aware, especially social work and psychology, psychiatry, and all those that have been around for a while. They're very, very aware of the privacy laws. It's drilled into us. Other counselors too, marriage and family counselors, licensed LPCs, those kinds. They're very, very aware of the privacy. So just important to know. And one of the things I think that just referring to what you were saying, Carmen, is that one of the things that therapy does, and it can do it in 1 or 2 sessions, and hypnosis does it very well, is it offers people more choices. You were talking about, Carmen, that, well, I'm depressed, so I'm a depressed person. That's a narrow view of how to view oneself. Talking to a professional helps, and even hypnotist helps expand that. Hypnotism uses the imagination to help do that. Expand what typically what has become a very, very narrow view of things, whether it's negative or anxious or whatever. So it's in a nutshell, that's where therapy can do so much good, because it can give us a chance to see things in a way that we may not be able to see, and have choices that we may not believe we have, or we don't know that we have.
You bring such a good point, Randy, and you are a licensed psychotherapist and also a certified hypnotherapist. And I just remember something our teacher, Dr. Zeig, said, that hypnosis is badly seen as people putting people to sleep, which is quite the opposite. Through the hypnosis, we are awaken people to the realization of possibilities that is available to them to enhance their well-being. Possibilities, we are awakening you to possibilities. We're not putting you to sleep. Who's putting you to sleep is someone it's afraid of being put to sleep in hypnosis. You are being put to sleep every day by marketing. Now there is a run on some political. I'm not gonna say any names. And if you pay attention on political campaign, there is a way to run political campaigns by talking badly about your opponent. So people that are not, I know nothing about those people that are running. I gather the knowledge about these people that are running from the political campaigns that they go on TV. And then that is the knowledge I have about those people. So, and also the secondary, which is the most hideous impact that this kind of advertising has on you, it gives you permission to talk badly about other people, which is not okay. I've been saying for how long? Feeling badly, feeling uneasy, feeling angry is natural. What is not natural is to dump your anger on somebody else. What is not natural is to hold somebody else responsible for how you feel. It's not natural. That has become a habit with the evolution of civilization and the evolution of technology and all that. And we have been overwhelmed lately. I mean, when did internet became available? 1992, I remember talking about the internet and, oh, what is it? Let's take a look at it, get an email. And I remember, if you remember Netscape, anybody remembers Netscape? It's not even in business anymore. Maybe Yahoo bought them or who bought them, I don't know. But that was my first email that I had in 1992. And the internet used to go over a telephone line and all that. It's not even that long ago, right? So we are overwhelmed, and there is more to do in less amount of time. And then, of course, you're going to be stressed. But if you begin to manage yourself, I mean, how much social media do you have to do? And if you do social media, are you doing it constructively, like listening to this talk that helps you elevate your emotional intelligence? Because it's not just me or any, there's a lot of other people that are helping you elevate your emotional intelligence, become more self-aware, reduce your anxiety, understand that emotions are normal. And you're going to have gradient of emotions throughout the day, every single day. And to expect yourself to feel good all the time, to expect, I don't know about expecting. I don't think it's possible to feel 100% happy all the time. Content, yeah. Are you ever not going to be stressed, and are you ever not going to be irritated about something? I don't know about that. We're humans. We're supposed to have emotions. Yeah. So it's very, very important to know thyself. And I've been offering, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I've been offering free guided meditation, which are actually really cool training techniques within. There's nothing for you to do, but there's a training that happens at the indirect level to the free guided meditation. I've been offering them for a very, very long time. And for a while, people join, and then for a while, people didn't join. And then some people reported feeling so wonderful about them, and then they don't come back. And then they come back months later, and say they have a lot of anxiety. And then I go, well, where have you been? I've been offering this for free. And then you don't participate, but then you complain about having anxiety. So understanding that there is so much to do, we ought to choose about what to do first. And if we learned anything from pandemic, the third thing is that health, safety, and health comes before anything else. Yeah. Health is important. physical health, emotional health, mental health, spiritual health. And whether it's coaching, whether it's hypnotherapy, whether it's psychotherapy, whether it's whatever that you go to, nowadays people that don't train themselves, because psychotherapy helps you train to, well, depending on the various type of methods, they help you awaken to the realization of the possibilities available to you. It's just that hypnosis works much quicker. It takes you quicker there, right? And then there's coaching, and then there's techniques, and I have a ton of techniques to teach you. But then there is a choice. How do you choose? Do you choose to browse the mindless social media? Social media, it's for a big part, it's a good tool, because I'm using social media to bring to you awareness, right? But there comes a point where there might be a bit too much. I mean, how many times do you have to scroll through the social media and look at the kitty cats? I mean, kitty cats are allowed. I'm sorry. Gossip over the social media. What good does that do? But then how often do people go on social media just to see who's doing what? And you know what? A lot of people are going through difficulties, but they're not gonna show it to you on social media. They're only gonna show you their good side. Like right now, the room that I'm in, you don't get to see all of the room that I'm in, but there's plenty of mess around here. But you only get to see this portion of the camera, which is rather organized, right? Randy?
And I would add just to that is that you were saying hypnosis, that includes self-hypnosis too. Just like you're talking about those techniques that you have, Carmen, the meditation techniques, which is basically self-hypnosis, just a different.
Yes.
It's a different thing, more, but it's the same, but it's different. But it's not as focused, but it still can help a person get in touch with themselves, and like you said, get some insight. For example, talking about scrolling, if I'm looking at media and scrolling down, and it's one thing just to compress and just scroll down and read junk. But then at some point I start thinking, why do I care about this? Why am I reading about Amber Heard and Johnny Depp? I like Johnny Depp as an actor. I like her as an actress. Why am I reading this? What's the point? I just become aware that, there's some other things I could be doing with my time that would enrich my life better, rather than this, which is the reading equivalent of junk food. We love it. I love junk food. Everyone does. But at some point, it's like, this is not healthy. So
yes. You bring out such a good point, Randy. I mean, gossip is interesting, and
I love gossip.
Yeah, and then people begin to get ideas from the gossips. Well, we in our day-to-day life, we don't live our lives as the big stars do. And then when at that level of income and that level of fame, with the amount of attorneys that they have, they begin to manipulate information within the legal system to get to a specific outcome. So then you complain about anxiety and being overwhelmed, but then you spend your time looking at something like that it doesn't help you. It helps zero. It actually adds more to your anxiety and to your stress. So yeah, how do you choose what do you spend your time on? But also something that it's highly, highly important, and a lot of people, it's very little talked about. Identity, who you are, a lot of people struggle, not necessarily struggle, but a lot of people don't take it in consideration. And I'm an immigrant, and immigrants, a lot of immigrants, they know that they have their, especially people living in a US of A, I'm going to limit myself to USA and to Romania. Like a lot of Romanians, they know that they have a Romanian side, and then they have an American side, and then the in between is it's a bit wobbly. It's a bit wobbly, and then even in within the Romanians, there used to be, it probably still is, I'm not paying attention to it anymore nowadays, that me as a Romanian, if I would speak English rather than Romanian, I would be criticized that I would forget where I came from, like I would forget my roots. And that's such an interesting concept. I mean, I was affected by it, don't get me wrong. And I started to doubt myself, and then it took me some time to realize that, wait a minute, I'm Romanian, I moved to the United States, this is who I became, this is who I am now. It doesn't mean that if I don't speak Romanian, it doesn't mean that I forgot where I came from. Absolutely zero. It's such a detrimental belief. If you want to have that belief for you, go ahead and have it. But to go ahead and criticize somebody for something insignificant, insufficiently looked at, it's irresponsible, right? Because this is who I am. I spend more of my life here in the United States than I spend in Romania, and this is who I am. I am Romanian American, American Romanian. And if for me it becomes easier to express myself in English, then guess what? I'm going to use English. And if someone needs me to translate in Romanian, I will be happy to. But a lot of us already know that the two languages are such two different languages that in order to express a concept in English, you might use about 20 words. And then if you go to express the same concept in Romanian, it might take you half an hour. Now, who has time? We don't have as much time for that. So, and this is something, this is something very common to all the immigrants. That this identity, or who am I? Did I forget my roots? I don't think you forgot your roots. We don't forget. You don't forget where you came from, but embracing who you are and going forward with that, adding to your identity. It's not splitting. That there is no splitting. I mean, we all have aspects. We all have aspects within our identity. We have parts to ourself. The identity is just so complex. So what I do in the Authentic Identity series that I teach, I cover different aspects and different parts of the identity while at the same time elevating your emotional intelligence, and then having those parts come together, and then having you understand the difference between duality, right and wrong, good or bad, either or, because it's not really either or. It's not really either or. It's rather simultaneous. It's rather simultaneous, and you don't always have to choose either or. Things are not black and white. They're not polarized. So if they're not polarized and in simultaneous time, especially now, lately, nowadays, there is a multidimensionality to everything. It's called simultaneous time. So identity is important, and a lot of people identify themselves by the title they hold at their job, or they identify themselves by the role that they hold at home, or identify themselves by other aspects, by the passions that they have. There is no one title to one's identity. Everybody's identity has a combination of multiple aspects. And if years ago, a lot of people, how do I phrase this? The way people measure identity, its measurements, it's a big factor on emotional intelligence, identity, emotional health, mental health. It's a big factor. But the way identity used to be measured years ago was pretty much related to the title you hold at work or to the role you have at home. Well, not anymore nowadays. If you have a job and you love what you do, you're lucky. If you have a job because you have to pay your bills, you're also lucky in a lot of instances, right? So you are not your title, you are not your name, you are not your role, you are not your gender, you are not all of the things that you think define you. Who you are is that which makes choices and treats others with respect. The moment you begin to respect all that is, your emotional intelligence elevates automatically, and your anger will not be thrown on somebody else, and nobody will be blamed for you feeling badly. Only by practicing respect. Nothing else, just respect. A different kind of respect that you practice thus far, different kind of respect that you've learned growing up of what respect is, of course, but only by practicing respect, you will achieve so much more, so much peace of mind and well-being and emotional intelligence and emotional health. Randy?
Well, and I would think, I'm not an immigrant, but I mean, I would think you could honor your, a person could honor their heritage without, honor their heritage and respect it without losing it, still assimilate into this culture. I would suspect that's what a lot of people have to do. I mean, they have to wear two hats, but you still honor. And, for a lot of people, there are parts of their history and culture that they'd like to forget. I think of Eastern Europe before the Berlin Wall fell, the Eastern Europe part, how horrible that was for so many people. Well, I mean, I'm sure they would like to be able to go somewhere to forget some of that, meaning that it's okay to honor that part of your culture which you're proud of and love. And it's okay to forget some of it that's not so good. We all have it. I mean, there's a lot of stuff here in this country we need to, that's not something to be proud of. But I would think, being able to honor a heritage would be, another option rather than, well, either you speak English or you speak Spanish. And if you don't speak German, then you're being disloyal to the homeland. That's a very narrow way to look at it, in my opinion. But then that's just, I'm going back to the idea that we want to have more options and more choices. And just like you're saying, Carmen, it's one person. You're expanding what identity means rather than narrowing it, right?
Yes. And then to come back to, you always want to bring up hypnosis, which I forget, but you're good at coming back to hypnosis, Randy. Hypnosis is guided meditation, self-hypnosis. Meditation, it's a form of self-hypnosis, and hypnosis varies. There's so many different kinds of hypnosis available. It helps you get to the roots of understanding not only who you are and becoming self-aware, but where you want to get to where you begin to understand your processes. When you begin to understand your reaction, when you begin to understand why you react the way you react, and then begin to choose to respond. And that doesn't happen overnight, and doesn't happen by reading an article, and it doesn't happen by listening to this podcast either. You become aware that this podcast brings you awareness that something like that is available. So once you know that something like that is available, that your processes are at the root cause of you reacting, of your blaming others for how you feel. And once you understand that you have processes, then you go, I wonder, maybe I want to learn about my processes. Yes. And then that becomes available for you to spend a valuable, healthy time on that. And how much time you want to devote to that, it's up to you. It's up to you. This is an extracurricular activity. And for the most part, we know our processes, but we are bombarded with information and with things to do, and there is little time to do what we need to do, all that we want to do. But health comes first. Without health, nothing exists. And of course, there's going to be anxiety. Of course, there's going to be arguments. Of course, there's going to be there's so many things. But and then in a family, in a relational situations, we begin to lean on the other for helping us get through the difficulties. And they are going to help us, but they cannot help us every day. And to expect the other to pull you out of the things you don't like, how you feel, it's not a realistic expectations too, because as you have a bad day, they have a bad day too, right? But what's realistic is to talk about it, and to talk about it not in a derogatory way, and not in an argumentative way, and not in blaming a type of way. Criticizing doesn't help unless it's constructive criticism, unless it's feedback. Let's just eliminate it. Criticizing bad, feedback good. That's it. Memorize it like that, you'll do good. Yeah. Let politicians criticize each other because that's what they do. Then you vote for whomever you want to vote. If you want to vote, that's fine. But feedbacking versus criticizing, it's much more valuable, because if you're in a relationship and it's so valuable to get the feedback from the other person, it's not that the other person is put you back, and try to stay away from words like always, never, and generalizations like that, because that's not how it works. To have the feedback of the other is very, very important. Why? Because you're so busy. You're busy going through the day and overwhelmed with so many things that the other can bring you significant information about your processes. And then when you have this information, you go, oh, I see. So that's how I'm doing it. Then you know. Then you can do something about it. You can choose to keep on doing it this way, or you can choose to change it, or you can choose to, before you change, just to take a better look at it, and then change it a little bit, or change it a lot, or change it whichever way gradient you want to go with, because it's life on planet Earth is not linear anymore. And if you think it's linear, if you think life on planet Earth is either or, I don't know. When you go to the grocery store and you want to buy a product and they have like 5 brands having the same product, that's going to be a situation of either or. You're going to buy this brand or that brand, most likely. Less likely that you're going to buy the same product from 2 brands. So price is going to be in consideration, and other things are going to be in consideration. And yeah, you're going to make a decision either or, right? but very few things in life are either or. There's nothing linear about the human body, nothing linear about the subconscious. And the subconscious is that drives and runs your body. Without the subconscious, this human body doesn't go. Your rational mind, your conscious mind, your rational mind is rather linear. And thank God it's linear, because we need linearity. We need direction. Without linearity, you don't have direction. Then you're just going to go all over the place and not do anything, not achieve anything. So both are needed. One is not better than the other. But there is such thing as polarity, and there is such thing as crossing the line, and there is such thing as too much or too little. So what you want to achieve in life, you want to achieve balance, cooperation, collaboration, balance. And again, kindness and compassion are free. They don't cost you anything. Randy?
I would just add, you mentioned, let me see, always and never. There are other ways. Also, I would just add to those, should, because those are good, those are excellent, very good point. Always, never, should, ought to, people had better do this. Anytime there's that kind of thinking, it becomes what? Narrow. People should behave. People should talk Romanian. If they love their country, why aren't you talking Romanian? You should. That kind of thinking is very narrow, and it can lead a person to have very unpleasant emotions. One of the things I love about hypnosis, especially, I'll give an example of hypnosis. For example, narrowing and expanding. As Carmen, you know, I'm starting a new job in a few days. I just became aware, you know, just really mixed feelings about it. A lot of anxiety, and a lot of, this is going to be a disaster. I've made a mistake. I'm too old for this. What is wrong with me? Why am I making these crazy decisions anyway? There was that kind of thoughts going on more than I meant to. So I bought a self-hypnosis program a couple of days ago, and it specifically is anxiety about a new job. So I was listening to it, and one of the things it is encouraging my conscious and subconscious to think of is that, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of anxiety, obviously, about meeting new people and having a new boss, and you know, tons and tons and tons of stuff that's going to work out. But it's also a new adventure. It's also going on a new trip. It's going on a place I've never been. It's starting a new journey that who knows where it's going to go. And in a sense, that going on that kind of adventures can be very interesting and exciting. And I don't know if fun's the right word to use, but you see how it went from, but how it can go from being, this is a disaster, everything, it could be a mess, to, well, it could be this, and this. It could also be interesting. It could be an adventure. It could be the best decision you've ever made. It could be the worst, but it could be the best. It could mean a lot of new things. So that kind of expansion is just what you're talking about, Carmen. And I got that from the self-hypnosis, program I bought. And it wasn't, not that people should go buy one. There's a million of them on YouTube. I just wanted one very, very, very narrowly fixed. And that's the one I got. And that's how that kind of stuff works. Would you agree? Do you agree with that?
Yes, I would agree. And I want to point out that you're a licensed psychotherapist and the hypnotherapist, and you had some normal anxieties about starting a new job, and that's normal to have anxieties about that. Not that you have an anxiety disorder, but you went the healthy way, and you use this self-hypnosis, which brought up to you a perspective which you were not considering while having ruminating thoughts, while running your anxiety. So
Yep.
emotionally, through your emotion, you applied your emotion and intelligence skills, and you look for perspective, and then you went, oh, okay, then the anxiety disappeared. So sometimes all it takes is it's just different perspective, because not everything is either or, and not everything is linear. So do you not see the forest from the tree, or are there too many branches on the tree and then you cannot see the forest, right? So perspectives are definitely important, and it is an exciting adventure to get a new job and meet new people, and it's definitely challenging, is because it's a learning curve, and you have to learn new things, new people. You have to learn the new boss, the way they like it, and how to interact with people, what jokes to use and what jokes not to use. With some people to smile, with some people not to smile, with some people to smile more, with some people to. It's a learning curve. So it's challenging, but it's also rewarding. It's also rewarding when you're in it, and then you see that, oh, that was actually easy.
Yeah, and I knew that at some point I knew that, but that's where I think subconsciously, like I said, like the hypnosis kind of helps, what's the word, ignites that. It turns the light on, basically.
Yes, yes, yes. Because earlier, what did I say earlier? That although hypnosis is poorly seen as putting people to sleep, we are actually awaken people to the realization of increasing their well-being through possibilities available to them. So, yeah, that's enlightening. It sheds a light on, become the candle for all in the room to see. So. Yes, perspective.
Trying to move away from saying things like, yes, you're more, even though Milton Erickson himself said it, you were more asleep, you're more asleep. I'm with trying to, and coming out of a trance, now you're fully awake and alert and awake. Because you're right, Carmen, it's not sleep. It feels like sleep because our brain waves are close to that mental state, but it's definitely, yeah. I remember that was a really good point. I'd forgotten Jeff Zeig said that. It was it's the opposite of sleep.
Yes, yes, yes. And what happens in during normal awake time when we work, our attention is pulled in multiple directions, and we are processing information through all of our 5 senses. And there's a lot of input. It's not all input, it's verbal or numerical. It's not just words and numbers, or that we process information through our eyes, through hearing, through tasting, through touching, through sensing. Yeah. So what hypnosis does, it takes away the extra, the tumultuous input, and narrows your focus down to awaken you to possibilities. And then all of a sudden you find yourself like, oh no, that doesn't bother me anymore.
There's a different way to think about it. There's a different way to see it. There's a different way. Instead of criticizing somebody, maybe there's another way to see this. Maybe I'm being too rigid because I think I know what people should do, and how they should behave and how they should act. Maybe that's on me more than, and maybe there's a different way to be content with life without trying to tell everyone else how they should be doing their lives. That was a lesson I learned the hard way to being a therapist. Ooh.
Yes, yes, and you bring up such a good, because a lot of difficulties that people go through, a lot of the heaviness, it goes into this should have, could have, would have. They know what other people should do, but they don't look on what they should do. And more people are more concerned with their rights as opposed to the responsibilities. So before rights, there are responsibilities. And of course, there are rights, and of course, you are entitled to many things. But before all that, you are responsible for much more than you are entitled to. So, and a lot of professionals, a lot of therapists have a professional side effect of not all of them, but sometimes it's easy to have the side effect of knowing what the other person should do or what's the correct course of action. In the context in which it's presented, yes, would definitely have alternatives that this could go this way, or it would be more beneficial through a different perspective, to a different approach. But when you live your life and you are in your life, living your life, you have all the context together in the experience that you're having at that moment. You're the one that makes decisions. You're the one to look at possibilities, alternatives, as everything. And the good thing about hypnosis is that it helps you get to those possibilities through experience. I mean, I have, how many clients did I have already that they were just getting angry at their spouse, not because they don't love their spouse, but because they're overwhelmed. And after a few sessions, they would report to me how calm and non-irritated they would be over the same situation, and their spouses would be amazed by thinking that something is wrong, that they didn't react with anger or with irritation towards them. So that's
you gave them more. You gave them more choices. You more options.
Yes, and that's a great success.
Mm-hmm.
So not only you begin to see options, behavioral options, but your anxiety reduces. And when you have less anxiety, more it's available to you. And not everybody that has depression has clinical depression. Not everybody. And seeing a doctor and being helped with medication nowadays, if it's available and if it works for you and if it's prescribed by a doctor and if it helps you without hurting other things, we shouldn't be ashamed of it. Are you kidding me? In the days of age, if someone's judging you, I don't know about that. Let them judge.
Clinical depression has a very, very specific symptom chart. So yeah, to be diagnosed as having clinical depression, there are numerous symptoms that somebody has to have for a period of time, not just for the next couple of days or so. It's a long list of symptoms. Not a long list, but it's a list of symptoms that have to occur over a specific amount of time. So, just feeling down and blue and unhappy and dissatisfied, that's not always clinical depression at all. In fact, there's a lot of people that argue that we psychologicalize too much of that. That's normal. A lot of that's normal stuff, normal life.
Well, of course, it's normal life. It's not possible to be 100% happy all the time. It's not possible to be 80% happy all the time. That's not how it works. Why? Even if you eliminate the external, even if you eliminate the environment, everything that's outside of you, you still have a body that it's doing a lot of work inside you, right? And who was it? Was it Carl Jung that used to call? Oh, I like to have a word with him. The that before menopause was called menopause, he coined the term women's hysteria. He don't know why women are irritable. Well, how about you invite someone like that? Well, not anymore. The guy's long gone. Invite him to have nobody understands menopause and the irritability of the hormonal imbalance up until you're in the body and you experience that. So back then, very little was known about the hormonal influence over the psyche, over the mood, over the feeling. So calling a woman, no, you know what? No, absolutely not. A woman on menopause and a woman on PMSing and premenstrual syndrome and perimenopause, you don't want to get there. You no. A woman, you say nothing badly about her appearance to begin with, and then no, not menopause. Not unless you know what it is to experience that rush of chemicals in the body that makes you feel in a split of a second, you're feeling perfectly content, concentrating on what you do. Everything is 100% peaceful. And then you have a rush of chemicals in the body that just throws you off the balance. And emotional intelligence is required for you to begin to understand that and begin to manage that. Now, that is not easy to manage when your physical body keeps on, whether it's menopause or whether it's something else. Maybe it's a different medical condition where the chemicals in your body are not working right? Where your organs are not working right, when there is miscommunication within, there is an imbalance of function in the way your body functions. So understanding even that, understanding that causes a lot of the anxiety and a lot of the subclinical depression, it's wise to understand that. And then once you understand, there is something you can do about it. Yeah. Better diet, exercise, again, meditation.
Stay away from ticks. That's one of the big things to do.
Mm-hmm.
Lyme disease. I was just reading a book about chronic illnesses, and that was this author. That was one of her points, was that the pandemic has opened the door to us understanding better the mind, body, all how, like you said, how that's connected and how it's all intertwined, and that there's so many things we don't understand, that we don't understand. A lot of it's from, a lot of it's misogynistic, that we have, if somebody has symptoms that can't be counted, foggy brain is one that comes to mind, that it's not physical, it's something wrong in our head. So yeah, and the COVID has brought it out because of long COVID, and people are now seeing that things like long COVID are not just psychological and not just people it's not in their head. Those kind of things really exist. So
yes, and you bring up such a good point. And that is the biggest mystery of all the mysteries that lies on planet Earth remains to this day the human body. We haven't discovered it all. We know so much. We have so much information. We have so many different doctors with different specialties, but they still don't know it all, and they have to tie it all together. And a lot of symptoms are similar within the symptoms. And then we have a lot of symptoms, we go to the doctors, and then they don't help us. Sometimes they can, sometimes they cannot. And we shouldn't get discouraged. And, there are good doctors and there are doctors, and there are excellent doctors and there are doctors. So sometimes we're not as likely to find a good doctor or an excellent doctor. Sometimes we just get a doctor, right? So it is our responsibility to keep on asking questions. Go seek a second opinion. I know there is no time, but health is the most important there is. And just since the pandemic, they uncovered a lot of things. And we already know that COVID has neurological implication. It's not just a cold virus. So through beginning to study the implications of that, they discovered neurological diseases that otherwise were dismissed as mitral valve prolapse or irritable bowel syndrome. And now the medicals, the doctors beginning to integrate 3 nervous systems. Up until recently, that there was the sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system, and the way it affects and it regulates the physical body, moods, and emotions. But now the enteric nervous system is being brought into play. Enteric has to do with the gut, which is stomach. It's the third part, the enteric nervous system is being brought into play, and having it become a part because it affects the enteric nervous system, affects the sympathetic and parasympathetic, therefore the organs in your body. And before we go even in more depth, it is the enteric nervous system, the stomach, the gut, that has more neurotransmitter receptors than the brain, than your brain could possibly have. So I remember a doctor once told me that the gut is so complex that if the gut, enteric nervous system, would have to have a heart, it would be a system of its own. Now that's a big statement.
That's exactly what this book I read, just finished it today. It's called The Invisible Kingdom. It's about this, it's a really, really good book about this woman's 10-year journey, and still going on with multiple medical issues. But that's exactly one of the points she makes, is that we're just now understanding the role of the gut, the role the gut plays in this. I think, don't quote me on this, but I think she said there are like, I know it's more than 1 billion, but I think it's like 3 trillion bacteria in our gut. 3 trillion is a lot.
Yes.
And so, yeah, it's just becoming, we're just now becoming more aware of how that impacts us. She said also, I don't know if you've heard this, Carmen, but she said that serotonin is produced by the gut.
No, there is more receptors, neurotransmitter receptors in the gut that is in the brain. So people with IBS or gastroesophageal reflux, if they take a little bit of serotonin-based medicine, they find that their gut is calmer because there's more receptors in the gut. And that it also serotonin-based medication, not all of them, some of them that I'm aware of, it helps reduce the overproductive of acid, because the gut needs acid to digest foods. If you don't have acid in the stomach, you don't digest food, and you end up with more troubles. And balancing the gut with the bacteria it's one of the most complex things to do. There is no clear test on it. It's very, very complex. And this is where healthy diet, lifestyle, and diet come into play. You can just put a lot of garbage in your body and expect no garbage to come out. It will come out in a form of a disease, disorder, in a form of a bad mood, in a form of anxiety, depression, if you keep on putting garbage in the body. So the body is a temple.
Quote the Bible.
All right. So that shall suffice for tonight. Let's see, do we have any more questions? No, I don't see any more questions. So what I would like to say before we go is that the mind is a tool that consciousness uses to distinguish between similarities and differences. You are not your mind. You are that which is aware, discerns, makes choices, and treats yourself and everybody with respect. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.